The views and opinions expressed in these historical letters that may contain vernacular used in the World War II era, the post-war era, and the Cold War era do not reflect the views and opinions of any of the individuals involved with this project, including, but not limited to, the podcast's creators.
Hello, everyone.
Good morning, Jamie.
Good morning, Allison. You got your coffee?
I do have my coffee. Yep. When this episode, we're on episode 8 of the Love Sweetie podcast here. Already episode 8. This one's going to air on Sunday, June 16th, which means it's Father's Day when this airs. So happy Father's Day to all the dads out there. And in a special note, I wanted to bring this up because I think the last time I mentioned it was in episode 0. So in these letters, we've had Chester's letters narrated. And Chester, of course, is Sweetie's father. The person who's doing the narration is my father, Sweetie's son. So I think it's nice on at least the Father's Day episode to call out, good job, Lewis, on narrating your grandfather. He is one of the few people that remembers his grandfather as he was, since it's been so long since Chester passed away. But yeah, so happy Father's Day to everyone. Shout out to my dad, who's doing an excellent job now that he's decided to call himself Morgan Freeman. You know, that he's gotten to that level. Not yet. Maybe not yet. I don't think there's an Oscar coming his way for his narration of Chester's letters. So still some stuff to work on.
So appreciate.
Yeah. So happy Father's Day, everybody. And with that, we have 2 letters for today. Now, Chester, we don't have one of Chester's letters today. This is 2 more letters from Sweetie, both in September of 1942. One letter is being written right after she writes the letter that ended the last episode, which is the exuberant letter of getting her job at NAS Ottumwa at the Navy base. If you missed last week's episode, the Navy base in Iowa,
in landlocked Iowa.
Landlocked Iowa has this Navy base.
Can't get farther away from the ocean if you tried.
Right? But they have to train the pilots. And so the naval forces are going to be training pilots and mechanics out there at the naval base. And Sweetie has landed herself a very good job with a staff at age 19. And she's getting free transportation out there. And she's hanging out with the Corey family, who seems to be basically taking her in and giving her free food. And she's buying her new wardrobe, and she's elated and flashing her badge, which I was happy to wear this week, is her actual badge back from the 40s. Yeah. Again, not sure how many of those have survived from the women that worked on that particular base. But yeah, so that's where we find Sweetie right now. And we're going to continue more with how she's finding her work and her day-to-day. So,
and this is normally, I will read through the letters before we record an episode. But in this episode, I said I wanted to give my genuine reaction to reading the letters with you all for the first time. So this will be fun. I want to try this out and we'll see. But I can't, it's kind of hard for me to say, I'm not going to read the letter. I really want to read the letters, but I didn't do that this time. So I'm curious to see how this one goes.
Yep. I think you're in for some surprises as usual.
Yay.
September 1st, 1942. Dear Jean, you've just about received my last letter as I start to write this one. I got your long letter yesterday, and I did enjoy it so much. Frank did think to call you up. He intended to call both you and sister, but Mom thought that if he would write a letter, it would be cheaper than a call, and he could write more than he could tell you in 3 minutes, so he agreed to write to you rather than call. The folks didn't say a lot about you. They just said that they thought you were not really serious about Bob. Before I go any further, you didn't tell me what Bob's going away present was. I'd like to know if you don't mind telling me. I'm sure it was something nice. He was rather thoughtful to leave you his radio and his lamp. I'm sure you'll enjoy both, not because you don't already have one, but because it was his, and that means more than you care to express in words. So just to be really clear here, the Bob being referenced is the romantic relationship that Jean's in with a person named Bob, not
those lovely brown eyes.
Yeah, the lovely brown eyes from the last letter.
That's who we're talking about right now.
Yeah. And there can be a bit of confusion here because the family, one of the siblings is named Bob. This is clearly Jean's romantic interest here. And I love how the gesture was a radio and a lamp. So, a radio and a lamp.
And I do want to point out too that Sweetie does, she starts off many of her letters like, I'm writing you a letter, write me one, please write me one, you haven't written me a letter. And this one, she gave credit where credit was due.
Yes, she did.
And told Jean, thank you for your long letter, and I enjoyed it so very much.
Yeah.
So, have to appreciate that.
I'm glad that you sent flowers to Mrs. Kunkel. She could not enjoy them, but I'm sure that the girls appreciated it. You made a very nice selection. I'm sure it must have been beautiful. Just a little gesture like that can mean so much to people at a time like that. So, Mrs. Kunkel, the last name was revealed a couple episodes ago. That's Bob's last name. So this is Bob's mother that she's sending the flowers to. And if Bob is going away into the service, then the letter is being sent as a nice gesture with regards to, we know this is a sad time when someone's leaving, so we're going to send flowers.
Those are sweet.
Mm-hmm. Did I tell you that Maida and Frank wanted to be married on this trip home? There we go. Maida has a good job with the Child Welfare Division in Chicago. She's had it for such a short time that she didn't want to give it up, even though she could have gone with Frank as his wife. I don't think, though, that was the main reason for their not being married. The main reason was that Maida's folks objected to their being married while Frank faced the war. They are rather old, and Frank said that it would have been pretty hard on them to have her get married and go away from them. She's the youngest in the family, and you know what a difference that makes. They flatly refused to let them be married. Their stipulation, too, was that Frank had to join the Lutheran Church. Daddy has become perfectly reconciled to their marriage. He said so himself. I think that they would be reconciled to yours, too, in time. Of course, you must expect to be lectured to and all that, but I think that if you really care enough about Bob to marry him, that they would take the same attitude towards your marriage as they have to Bob's and to Frank's. You should never say that there would be a barrier between you and the family because of your marriage to one of Catholic religion. I know that you would face some opposition, but it would by no means create a permanent or even temporary barrier between your family and the folks. You know that we Demarys are of a type distinctive of any other. We love as passionately as any human ever does. We have a stronger family bond and family love than I've been able to detect in any other family I've known very intimately. We've all of us some rather peculiar ideas, but when it comes to the place when one Demery faces opposition from the outside of the family ring, you'll find the rest of the clan right behind daring destruction to any one of the rest of us. We do squabble amongst ourselves. Those squabbles are nearly always over some trivial thing that passes as each day passes and a new day dawns. We can meet each day and its troubles knowing that if we do get in too deeply, there is always another family member to whom we can turn for help and a darn good scolding. We may be a little too quick to say, I told you so, but even so, we'll do what we can for each other. Yeah, there's a lot here of what's going on. We know right now that Frank and Maida have been in Illinois. So that's one piece of information we didn't have previously, because they're referencing that Maida is in Chicago. We also know that Maida's family is of the Lutheran background. So I don't think there's too much of a big difference here. Probably Chester and Laura are not having too many issues between Presbyterian and Lutheran. They're both Protestant denominations. So a little more in connection there than the divides that they've noted before between Presbyterian and Catholic. But even so, she's like, just expect to be lectured. And then there's all this interesting information about Maida's parents who are not approving of the marriage as long as Frank is not there and he's overseas. Yeah.
And if that's their youngest.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, the baby of the family.
Yeah. With Maida, we've got this idea that we've got a lot of the women that are following the spouses to their base locations. Like, I think there was one that was going to California. There's this idea of basically maybe even a woman being stranded at like the last domestic base while the guy's going off into another theater overseas. So for her to leave home, if Frank's going to be deployed, That's the idea. And there is a practicality to that I totally get on Maida's parents' side. At the same time, he wasn't even writing to his own parents because he was so obsessed with Maida. So it's not clear that that's actually going to work in this case, that they're just probably going to go off and do what they want to do.
Yeah.
And then we get to this second section here. This is one of my favorite quotes of all time from the letters. It's her description of the family.
Yeah.
This whole section. We are a distinctive, we are peculiar, we have all of our faults, but we're a really close-knit clan. And I think that just the way she describes it, I think every family has a little bit of this, right? Everybody understands the other family members. Things don't always go perfectly, but once you're outside of that family sphere, if somebody bothers another family member, even if maybe you're not even talking to that person at the time, you're ready to go to arms against that person because they're attacking the family. And she's describing this.
And it's lovely. And, and I'm sure that like at this time when both of their brothers are at war.
Yeah.
And this is a time when they need to come together.
Right.
And she has hinted to this in other letters of like the severity of the situation. Like, there's cousins going off to war, right. And when you have this, like those people are not coming home.
Yeah, they're
so
very
to have to further just to say that the bond, their family bond. It's kind of upsetting for me, actually. Yeah. It's like. It definitely brings to me like a reaction, like this is the world that they're in. They're going to war. They're like hearing stories, and and Frank and Maida wanting to get married, and obviously he is totally enamored with her. And then and also kind of like that little story, like no, the parents say no, this isn't a good thing to do, and it's like, but we're in love and we love each other, and like this might be the end, and like just the whole situation. It feels like everything is cranked up. To level 10 because of the war and the culture and the current situation that the world is in.
Yeah, I was just watching the video. This year it's the 80th anniversary of the D-Day commemorations, and there's still some veterans that are with us. Not many left, and just the imagery of these veterans being on those beaches again. Obviously this letter's from 1942, D-Day's 1944, but we think about the loss. There's a reason we call this the greatest generation. And the amount, the women are at the bases, they're in the workforce. How many cousins are in the service? How many people from all these families? The level of the loss in World War II is, I believe it is actually the greatest number of American lives as casualties, at least for the 20th century. The Civil War, whole other scale in the 19th century. But at least in the 20th, the commitment of the people to go into World War II is astounding, and where it impacted all society. So they are taking these moments to reflect and say, the family comes first.
Yeah.
About the bedfellow who said you were wasting time by not being married. I agree with him. I talked to Frank when I was home with him about his being married. He seemed to think it rather funny or shocking, take your pick, for me to say that I'd be married before my prospective husband was to leave. I would, and I'd not be sorry afterward either. I think that Frank wished that Maida would, in open defiance of her folks, marry him and go to the East with him. I told him that had it been me, and I'd wanted to be married, that I'd have done it in spite of them. I'd be married if I was positive that I'd be happy with him. You realize that it is your problem to face and to solve to your own advantage. I say this, though, that if you are certain that you'll be married sooner or later, why not make it sooner? If you're satisfied that you'll not go with anybody else and you're certain that he won't either, then you can't feel bound to him, because there would be no desire on either one of you to do anything that would hurt your conscience. Just the opposite. I'd be happier if I were bound, actually with a ring, than to be floating around somewhere between heaven and earth with nothing definitely settled. I do agree that this time was scarcely the time to be discussing marriage plans, but you'd do well to get it all settled.
I totally agree with her.
Yep.
Yep.
Guess of the church on time.
If I knew then what I know now, I would have married my husband sooner. Like, what's the point of putting it off?
Right. You're sure? You're sure. And so it's clearly that Jean's still going back and forth about Bob,
Yeah.
about what to do in this situation. I also think there's a neat little tidbit here about to go east with him. So Bob, the last time with the brother, Bob, we know he's in Hawaii.
Right.
Frank seems to be on the East Coast. So we'll have to see if that's actually the case in future letters. But the siblings seem to be separated by distance, potentially going into different theaters. But yeah, just the opposite. I'd be happier if I were bound actually with a ring than to be floating around somewhere between heaven and earth. Like until you're married, you're just floating around, single,
Well,
somewhere on
too,
the
but
earth.
I mean, Maida and Frank obviously they love each other.
Yeah.
And it seems like Jean and Bob, I mean, she's been thinking about it. And, I mean,
Yeah.
these letters were fairly close together. So,
Yeah.
but this is something that has been heavily on Sweetie's mind.
Mm-hmm.
She has been considering this a lot.
Right.
This is the time when, you come into that where you're like, well, am I going to get married?
Mm-hmm. Oh, she's fully intending to get married.
And
she
wants to,
mentioned,
and she's all about it. And she's obviously had time to think about it. I'd love to be there with her brother, talking with my brother about certain things. I can imagine it's really fun.
Yeah.
But and she said he was shocked,
right,
or funny. Thought it was funny. But I agree with her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it would have been just get it, just do it. Now, so Bob is married to Florence, and Bob he's in Hawaii.
He's in Hawaii. Yeah.
Frank is not married yet.
Correct.
And they want to get married.
Yep.
This all adds a different element because of like if you're
right.
If we weren't in the war, of course we wouldn't. But now this adds this sense of urgency, and there's an actual deadline where we have to decide what we're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I can imagine that seems kind of scary.
And all the time, the mother, Laura, she's cautioning all the young girls and the radio show saying, "Don't rush into things. Don't rush into things." Now, Sweetie's been saying to Jean, be sure. Yeah. At this point, she's like, get a move on if you're sure already. And another thing, I think that you should sit down and write the folks a long letter telling them of your feelings for Bob. Oh, it shouldn't be so hard. You can't feel ashamed of Bob, nor can you be ashamed of your feelings for him. Not if you love him. And while it is rather personal, nobody has more right than they have to be in on it. They can help you analyze your feelings for him. And while Daddy may rant about his being a Catholic, just remember that he does not treat Florence unkindly, and that he has learned to like her. He will talk about Bob's drinking too, and that may prove to be quite a sore point. I'd say that you'll meet more opposition on that score than on any other, including the Catholicism. I'm so glad you remember that I could be bridesmaid. You remember we've always promised each other that we'd go to each other's weddings and each would stand up with the other as bridesmaid. I'm sorry that Bob doesn't like me. I think that if you decide to be married rather suddenly, that it would be better to be married by yourselves rather than try to get me into it too. You can't start arguing about the ceremony. Say that for the next 50 years. Mr. Corey just came in and said that his little AL suddenly got sick. I've got to stop and get to work and maybe do something for her. Write again soon. Letters seem to bridge the gap between Ottumwa and Iowa City. The boy is going to the post office, so I'll have to stop now. Love, Sweetie. So there seems to be this sisterly pact of we're going to be each other's bridesmaids. They're that close. They want to do that too. And she's saying, it's okay if that doesn't happen to be the case. I wonder if Jean's Bob got a hold of the previous letter about the drinking, or that they went over that, and it basically left a sour taste in his mouth for the sister. Very possible. Because she was very critical of him. These are much nicer letters, and it's almost too nice at some points with things. Is she trying to make up for that a little bit? I don't know. But for whatever reason, she's very clear here that he's not a fan.
But she was so nice to him and said so many nice things. And said that his smile was $1 million.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of money back then.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
definitely.
think that would be, but
yeah.
Well, maybe if he was a little sore about it, maybe then it's a problem.
Right. Yeah.
Gonna throw that out there. But yeah, this, and that makes me, my best friend and I actually had the same pact.
Mm-hmm.
My best friend, we were in high school. We were probably about Sweetie's age, a little younger, and I was like, "You're gonna be my bridesmaid," and she's like,
Mm-hmm.
"You're gonna be," and we
That's
were each
awesome.
other's, like, we stood
Yeah.
next to each other. But so this is something that Jean probably and her had talked about and discussed, and
Yeah.
now like with the whole urgency and like the whole
Yeah.
like we need to get
It
married and
is what it
stuff,
is.
you
Yeah.
can't have that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The juxtaposition of like the world that we live in now, Allison, all the war, like Ukraine and everything,
Mm-hmm.
and with the situation occurring back in 1942,
Mm-hmm.
it's such a beautiful glimpse into like how they were also dealing with these kind of major issues, like having to rush marriages, and she's got a job because of the war.
Yeah.
You know what
Yep.
I mean?
She's working at
Like,
a base because of the
yeah,
war.
she's working
Yeah.
at a base because of the war. She's working on the effort. I mean, that kind of had to feel good for her to be able to contribute. Yeah.
David McCullough, and I go back to this thought all the time when I'm reading these letters, which is he had brought up, we always call it, oh, it was a simpler time. And he would say in lectures, it was never a simpler time. Yeah, it was their time. It was just as complicated, just in its own way, as everything else. And the fact that we can draw so many connections between now and then for the pressures of just everyday life shows just how close we really are to this generation, even though most of this generation is pretty much gone and there are only a few remaining still surviving. But yeah, it was never a simpler time. This is absolutely showing it. There's all the pressures of dealing with family, there's external pressure, there's internal pressure, and everybody's just trying to balance that. The only difference that we have significantly is social media.
Mm-hmm.
That's the huge difference, is the communications. We're getting information by letter, maybe a phone call here and there. Now, she's been mentioning that calls can go through. She has a telephone at her desk at the base. This
Yeah.
is not typical.
No,
To be
she
able to
was,
call.
yes, that was a cool thing. She's
Yeah,
like
to have a
right
phone.
on my desk.
Right. Yeah. Now, if we're going to do these communications today, we have our phones in hand, right? We could just message, hey, how's it going with the relationship? Anything, do you want to talk? You want to get coffee? Things like that. They don't have that ability back then. So I wonder just how much more complex it makes it, because you have to imagine a lot more what's going on the other side until you get that next letter informing you of what's happening, and how much anxiety and stress that caused to not be able to communicate as rapidly as we do today.
Well,
So,
also maybe not though, because you know how stressful it is to be constantly dialed into everything that's going
oh
on in
my
the world.
gosh, yeah.
To
Mm-hmm.
have that, well, to be able to put stuff down,
Yep.
like be able to say, okay, well, I don't know, and I don't have any way of figuring out. Might as well go
Mm-hmm.
mow the lawn and
Yep.
feed the chickens
Do the
and
chores, read a book.
maybe, I mean, iron my clothes. You saw how
Mm-hmm.
long that took her to do.
Yeah.
And when she
Mm-hmm.
talks about washing her clothes, I'm like, where? How are you doing that?
Yeah.
What are you doing?
What
And
do
then you're ironing, so that obviously takes a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that's actually one of the first things that my husband ever got me when we started dating was an iron. He bought me, I had a new iron, and he bought me an iron. And back then, they had to heat it up
Right. Oh
and be
yeah.
careful with it, and stuff. So I think maybe it would have been easier to like focus on doing these daily tasks and living your personal life
Mm-hmm.
that back then than it is now.
To process the information. Yeah.
So, but I didn't read the second one either. So can we jump into that? Now I
Yeah.
need to know what's going
So,
on.
also from September of 1942. September 29th, 1942. Ottumwa, Iowa. Dear folks, I've tried to write to you several times, but I never seem to get a letter finished. I think that I told you about my staff, and that I'd had a raise, and that Mr. Corey was working for another one for me. He told us today that he had convinced Lieutenant Wilson that I should have and that I deserved another raise, that I had a responsible job. I'd done a good job, or assuming my responsibilities, and that my department was working well, and it is too. And so now all they have to do is find some way to give it to me without the senior administrative assistant blabbing to his force and getting them all dissatisfied. And that may be some job too. I think I thought that it will be rather soon. I do not know how much the raise will be, but every little bit helps, I always say. She's got a good deal here. She's only been working there for a month, and she's like, I think I'm going to get a raise, but we better keep it on the down low. Because if this person finds out that they're going to ask for raises and then that's how that works, right? Nobody's going to get anything because now everybody's asking. We have to be fair to everybody, but they're in different roles. But yeah,
But
she's been there for a month.
she's doing well.
Yeah.
She's like, oh yeah, I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
So she deserves it. This isn't just like oh, we're giving it to you because no, this is like you actually earned this.
Yes.
So,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, but it's funny because human relations is definitely a part of any job, especially in an office and stuff like that. That you definitely do have to work with people's personalities.
Yeah, there's a lot of personalities. This is a big paperwork area. You have to defend these things. So it has to be all merit-based. There has to be looking at everybody across the board. Is everybody doing the same role? Is everybody, getting compensated justly based on the work that they're doing? This is a lot of work, especially like today. A lot of this is done through human resources. There's no human resources department I'm hearing about here. It's Mr. Corey's going to Lieutenant Wilson and being like, hey, she's doing a good job, but we got to keep this on the DL. It's a different role. We don't want these guys getting upset, but we want her to keep happy because she's doing well a month in. So it's curious to see if she's actually going to get this.
Yes, I hope we find that out.
I have not done very much running around, and you will remember, Mom, that we talked about my spending too much money on shows and such. Well, when my day is over at 6, 6:30, 7, 7:15, and incidentally, that is not authorized for overtime, time and a half, I'm usually ready to go right to bed after a light lunch. Really, believe it or not, Lucille and I have been going to bed at 8 and 8:30 right along. It does save money, but I find other ways to get rid of it. For instance, I did something that I might be criticized for, but still I had a good feeling for having done it. And I'm pretty sure of getting paid back more than I put out, so I think that it was okay. I got a girl a job out here. The chauffeur who works for me talked to me about his wife working at the mitten factory in Fairfield, such long and tiresome hours, and asked me if I could do anything about it. I said I'd try, and I did her the job. She went to work the next day at $10 a week, more than she had made in the last year and a half, as my stenographer, one of the pool. But because she was the first girl here and I needed one immediately, we put her right in with me, and so to be nice to me, they invited me to their house overnight, just last week, and when I got there, they said that rather than drive back and forth each day, they thought that they would take an apartment here in Ottumwa, and because their furnace was an oil burner, the kind that you start in the fall and never turn off until the next spring, they didn't feel as though it was the fair thing to do to their landlady to start it for the short time they were to be there. So we sat in an unheated house until bedtime, and then I nearly froze until morning, and we had to get up real early to make it to work in time. I said I thought it was foolish to do it, and so I tried to talk them into moving to Ottumwa, and it finally narrowed down to the place that if they paid all their bills, they wouldn't have enough to pay the movers and the landlady. I said pay the landlady $10, and then I loaned them $20 to pay the movers. They've been treating me like I was the shining sun, and so I think that it was a worthwhile gesture. I'm sure I'll get paid back, and if I know those kids, they'll be quick about it, and they'll include interest. So now there's a level of generosity towards people she doesn't know too well, but she obviously is sympathetic to this individual, one of the chauffeurs that works for her, and then the wife working at the mitten factory. And I hadn't even really thought about factories making mittens, but obviously there's a lot still in textiles that's going on in these areas, and the wages are a little different. So he's like, basically, can you get my wife over to work with you? You've got this good thing going on over here. And she manages to pull it off. And they're so grateful that they invite her to the house. But then she's noticing, like, you can't live here with like freezing temperatures because you're going to leave soon. You want to be nice, because they're being nice to the landlady by not setting up the oil heat too early, because it's still end of September. Yeah. Like if they're going to leave soon, we can't just start up and then this house is being heated for nothing. Mm-hmm. And she winds up loaning them the $20 so they can get to Ottumwa. So she's building up. I have a very loyal staff underneath her to work there at the base. So
and she's kind of taking care of them, like the Corey take care of her.
She's paying it forward.
Yes, definitely.
And I think it's just such a beautiful gesture, and it's something that's setting the standard for things to come. She's already of the mentality, she's still just 19, that she's going to help take care of other people. But that's not the worst of the money deal. I went downtown, and in my search for a reversible coat, I ran across a 3-piece suit that is a honey. All wool, sort of a Shetland wool like my Russ suit, but a finer weave. It was an 11, and I tried it on to find it a perfect fit. And so I bought it on a layaway plan. It is expensive, so expensive that I'll wait until you see it and find out how well you like it before I tell you just how much it was. I've also bought a corduroy dress, the one I bought a long time ago, but didn't get until this Saturday night. A plaid wool skirt, 2 sweaters, and some new shoes. I did send the blue corduroy back and got a size smaller that really is a honey. However, it is too long-waisted and must be altered before it can be worn. And incidentally, that should be soon too, because it is now the time to start wearing those clothes. I took a lot of clothes to the cleaner. My green suit, my Russ suit. You know, that suit has had the elbows fixed several times, and I wonder what you think about sewing those leather elbow things on it. Or should those be saved for my old winter coat? My green corduroy skirt. Incidentally, I was downtown one Saturday night with a lot of time to spare, and just shopping around I found a green jerkin that I thought might match it. Bought it on condition and found that it almost made a Sunday outfit of that green skirt. So I sent it to the cleaner to freshen it up, and you'd just be surprised how nice it really does look. Mrs. Corey found that Betty's reversible had gotten too small some way. Betty's arms are too long for it now, and so she gave it to me. It is a light material, sort of resembles camel hair. But it was never a very expensive coat, and while it does show the wear considerably, it will do very nicely with processing the canvas side, and it will save me some money. I find that winter coats are priced fairly reasonably, and so I think that I shall find one that I like specially well and buy it on the layaway plan, and then I shall feel more like wearing the old one. Do not worry, though, for I shall see to it that all my other bills are paid up before I start it, and I have not slumped on my Parsons College payments either. I'm right real proud of me, and if you do not feel that I've been too extravagant with the clothes, I'll be even prouder. But I'm happy about that suit. Yeah, more clothing shopping here going on. I absolutely love that she's talking about the elbow patches, that style. And I always associate this with the men, right? Those sort of like those professor jackets, right? Especially I was in history field, so it's that stereotypical image of the history professor walking in with the one jacket that has the leather elbow patches, and they look very refined, and all they're missing is their cane and their Scottish cat to go with it. But yeah. So, but this is for the women's suit. Like, hey, if the elbows are worn out, why don't we just do this, and then we'll just make it new.
Oh, and it looks so nice.
Yeah.
I love those elbow patches.
Yeah.
And I love that she's like, so I found this really, really nice suit, and it's like a 3-piece.
Right.
Like, but it fits so good.
I keep rationalizing this in a letter, and then I'm going to put it on layaway.
I love how she, but anything that she loves is honey.
Oh, I love, the desk was honey.
The desk
in an episode.
These clothes are honey.
It's a honey.
She's like, it's like the vernacular of them, like the teenage,
Yeah.
Now it's like, that slay, or whatever. Don't judge me.
Right.
I love
that was back in the day. Yeah, for sure.
Like that she really loves something if it's honey. Oh yeah. But this is good. But yeah, so she's talking to her mom too, like, Mom, I know, blah blah blah, but I'm gonna buy them anyway, thanks, bye. And Mom can't do nothing about it, so really.
And this is the first mention of Betty. And Betty is the other daughter of the Coreys. She's I think she's in high school at this time. So this is Betty Corey, and Betty Corey's grown out of some outfits. So what's going on? The Coreys are like, oh, okay, here you go. Here's some more free clothing. Transportation. They're being right up the hill, getting some free lunches.
Yes. And
driving around in the Packard. Oh, and you know what? Why don't you just take this free coat too? So, absolutely.
I just love it.
I don't believe I told you that Coreys take me to their place every noon for lunch. Mr. Corey refuses to take his lunch with him when he leaves in the mornings for the base. And so, since I ride with him in the mornings, he always takes me right to their house for lunch. They call me their star boarder, and they've already promised that they'll take me with them when they are transferred to their next job, which should be down along the Gulf Coast somewhere. That is, if I do not want to stay on here permanently, and right now it looks as though I'll be able to do just that if I like. I'm bragging, yes, and there's a lot of truth in saying that I've got a very neat little setup right here. Well, she's joining the Corey family, clearly. They're like, if we leave, you're coming with us.
Oh,
So the relationship is extremely strong. Mm-hmm.
And it's so nice that she has that kind of support network.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, being away from her family and stuff. I'm sure that probably her and Mrs. Corey, you know, and Mr. Corey too. He's like, oh, you're coming with me.
Yep.
We're going to go home for lunch. Yeah. Like, all right.
Yep. All right. Sounds good. Yeah.
Sounds good. Let's go.
Yep.
And she said she's bragging.
Yeah.
She said she's bragging, but she also understands like what she has.
Oh, she knows she has it good.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't want to jeopardize that in any way. But you know, with all the fun and everything of a job and my own income and money to budget, I still feel that Jean should have one of each two of everything that I get. And so I think that I shall send her between $25 and $30 with which to hunt for a top coat that will very near match her new suit, and then she'll have a 3-piece coat too, and my conscience will not bother me. And two, I think that she'll have to have a couple of pairs of shoes too, and then I can stop buying for a time and save. For believe it or not, it's an established fact that I'll have to pay $300 income tax. Great guns, and I'm not old enough to vote yet either. Well, I'll have to tighten down after I fling a little more and get Jean some pretties. So there's some interesting things here as well. She's
is
doing
a good sister, though. I know.
Yeah. She's being so nice. The generosity of this letter. First, it's, the $20 to help the other family move. Now it's, you know what? I'm doing well, and I want to make sure my sister's taken care of and that she has some nice outfits as well. Yeah. And then we get to the thing as libertarians that we despise the most, which is taxes. And she's talking about the $300 income tax. I'd love for it to be $300 today. I'd love for it actually to be non-existent. But
well, yeah, let's talk about that.
Taxation is theft. But with the $300 income tax, yeah, she's upset. And then she gives this one thing that is very easy to forget, and I'd actually forgotten when I first read this letter. She's not old enough yet to vote. She's 19. So clearly, in this time, in the 40s, 19-year-olds, while women could vote, 19-year-olds could not. And so I looked into it. The year this changes is 1971. It's a while still. So you had to be 21 to vote. Yeah. But she's paying taxes.
Oh, of course.
And she's making this. Now, she's a Democrat. As a Democrat, she's making still the association. I don't think it really mattered political party-wise. It's, why am I paying taxes if I can't vote for the people passing the laws making the taxes? So this is just common sense. There's a couple things that really bother me about certain laws today that I would like to see change. I am of the firm belief that if you pay taxes in any way, you should vote. Now, perhaps this is a radical idea. Don't tax the 16-year-olds. Like, let them choose where it's going to go.
Tax the 16.
That's it.
See,
there has to be something.
See, and I appreciate this, but let's go a little libertarian here. I don't think that 16-year-olds should be paying income tax.
Yeah.
And I definitely don't think that a 16-year-old should be voting.
Right. Yeah.
Whatever. But $300?
Yeah, that's a lot for back then.
Dollars for that time? She's paying an income tax and she can't vote?
Right. This is certainly wrong, and obviously this is going to be something that does change historically, but it takes a while. I mean, we're in 42. It's going to take almost 30 years for the voting age to be lowered to 18. So really, to me, there's two options here. Either let the 16-year-olds vote because they're paying taxes, or just don't pay taxes as minors.
Yeah, I think
because you don't get to choose where it's going.
Yeah, definitely. They should not be paying taxes. They should get to keep all that money.
We were founded as a country on taxation without representation is wrong. And so this is wrong when this is going on. It was wrong when it was going on then, and she's not able to vote. The other thing that has always bothered me is the drinking age. And while I understand that the drinking age, why it's 21, I also think if you can be drafted at age 18 and be sent potentially to die for your country, I think you should be able to have a beer. And I'm not saying that the drinking age should be lowered for everybody, but I think if someone's in the military and actively serving at age 18, that should be waived 100%. because there's a certain level there. And I think there's things society needs to get to. And we just all need to be more individually accountable and individually responsible for ourselves with certain things, which I know all libertarians are going to be like, yes, individual responsibility and accountability for everything. Yeah. Just the individual having to pay taxes and not be able to vote. That's huge. But that goes on today, technically, with the 16-year-olds.
Yes,
with
this
people who
goes
are
on
being
today.
taxed.
And I think this would be a great time to maybe like explore that.
Yeah.
But that's all that I really think is going to happen.
Right.
Is this explore? It's not going to
Exploration.
change.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, I think both of us can agree that this was stupid. And even just not even as just libertarians, but it's like,
yeah, everybody's saying like, what's going on here?
With common sense, yeah. Like, why are we doing income tax, and why are they paying taxes if they're not being represented?
Yep.
Yeah.
I think that if I can spare the money, that is, if the Rogers kids can pay me back some of the money I loaned them, that I'll try to come home either this week or next. I'm not making any definite date, though. Do you suppose that Sister could come with her family and perhaps Jean? I'd like to make this visit for some little time, and I'd like to spend it with as much of the family as I can. I think that I shall have to try to get some money laid by, as they say, to meet some big things to come. And I can't come home very much. However, I shall try to put forth more effort to write to you folks better. I've owed everybody a letter for a long time. I wonder if you would pass these notes on to Sister and then to Frank and perhaps Jean. I'll try to come home, and I'll let you know definitely. It's 6:20. I got my work done a little early. I'm waiting on Mr. Corey. I've tried to write, but my job just takes up all my time. I'm even worried about it in my sleep to Lucille. It's a hell of a nerve-wracking job, and it seems as though by the end of the day I'll drop in my tracks. Every minute of my time from 8 to 6 is accounted for. And as I say, I go to bed early, but I wake up tired and unrested. I've had a final break with Dawn. Thank God. And I'm in bed by 8:30 or 9 each Saturday night and slept late on Sunday. And then get up to do my complete week's working and ironing and mending. For once, I can really say my week is full. There it is.
There it is.
She finally breaks it off with Dawn.
Well, it doesn't sound like she has any time for him.
Right. She's like, oh, I'm just tired. I don't have time for this right now. Yeah.
Yes, but you know, she was already there. She was there. Yeah. It just had to happen.
Planning it. Yeah.
I mean, look at she never responded to David Chase's proposal. So she probably wasn't in a hurry to be like, all right, Don, I'm going to kick you to the curb. But man,
there it is. Yep.
There it is.
So Ed done. David left hanging. Still trying to reach her. Don over. So we'll see what happens from here. The promises of money are not just pipe dreams. It really will materialize, but give me a week or two, will you? The money is to be used, as I said, for a top coat for your suit. Get a good one. Pay as high as $30 for the coat alone to get a good match. You never need tell how much you paid for what. I'll never question it at all. Do get a good coat and a good match. Go to CR if you have to. And I'll send you money for shoes so soon as I can, and then sweaters and skirts as time rolls on, and then I'll not feel like a heel. Even though I don't write often, I do think of you a lot, and the clothes are just a small gesture to show you how much I love you. See? Love, Sweetie. Yeah, go to CR if you have to. CR Cedar Rapids. That's where, that's what she's referring to. Spend $30 on a coat. Go all out. Get a good coat. So,
well, that's 10% of her income tax.
Yeah, 10%. Think how many coats her sister could be getting if it wasn't for taxes. For which
I just like how Dawn's an afterthought.
Yeah,
like that was funny. And then how she underlines. She underlined to get a good coat and a good match.
Yeah,
the older sister and her. That's so cute. But yeah, so I like how she's like, I don't write. I'm sorry. Again, she takes. I'm
exhausted. I'm writing all day.
She gives it out. You know, like write me letters. But if she's not writing, she owns up to it. Yeah.
She's starting to realize just the professional workforce, how much time that really takes. You know, it's interesting. I sit here and I still have the privilege of working remotely a lot, and I can look out the window during the work hours. And close to me is the school where I went to high school. I can see it from my window. And I keep thinking, I used to sit in these classrooms thinking like, oh, school's all day and all of this. And I'm like, now it's 9 to 5, get the work done. And I see the kids walking to school just as I did at one point, going through their day, us thinking, that the world revolved around us and that the most stressful thing was being in class. And now it's nope, work 9 to 5. And sometimes you just feel burnt at the end of the day. I totally get that. The long hours. Never appreciated it as a kid. Totally get it now. So when she says, she's doing 6 days a week too, and there's a war going on. So you also have that pressure of work, which is if you don't get your work done, what could be the possible consequences to the military effort that's going on? So I'd like to learn more if anyone who's listening are military historians and they knew more about the particular nature of the circulars that were going back and forth that these bases and offices were doing. We'd love to hear more about that. And it's something I'm going to be looking into a lot more, is the type of content that domestically they were doing. Because we know there's a lot of clerks at the front and communications coming from the front. What was the nature of all the communications going on with the bases? And it's probably a lot of the training memos of here's who's here, who's being deployed here, here's who's going here, because they're talking about circulars. So think about like a newsletter, almost, I would think, with the various offices. This person's done this, they're approved to go here. I imagine it's a lot of that type of clerical work that they're doing. So
yes, that would definitely be something that she would definitely need some like a break from, but she can't. She's like, I gotta work, and she can't go to see the movies. We know she loves movies. We know that she'd really enjoy that kind of stuff. And yeah, she's like getting into that, starting to learn like what it means to be in the workforce. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, and I know too, the older you get, see, she's 19. So do you remember like being 20 and just running?
Right.
Like I could do it. Like now at my age, 9 o'clock at night, I'm just like, I didn't get it done and I have no energy to finish it. So.
I like a nap after work. Just a little break. And I've started, like, it's funny because I was talking to a friend and they said, why are you going? Are you seriously like turning in for the night? It's like 8:30. And I'm like, yeah, I'm good. I'm good. It's fine. Yeah. And it's more of just that sort of emotional drain if you've had a long day at work, and she's having a long day pretty much every day. So it's really good that she has the balance with the Corys, that she's having these lunches and things, and she's getting to talk with other people, but they're all under those similar pressures. And it's a lot for a 19-year-old to be working full time and doing this.
And she's luckily being taken, like her food is being taken care of.
Yeah.
She's, somebody's feeding her. So she doesn't have to worry about that. But then she has one day a week.
Right. Or
to
Sunday.
do all the things that she needs to do.
Yep.
And she's still living with Lucille.
Yes. She's still living with Lucille.
Yeah. So she still also has like whatever, like this arrangement is as well. But, but it was, poor Dawn.
Sorry, Dawn. Wasn't meant to be. That's it.
Yeah, so that was very fun. That was a very lovely letter. Yeah. But I am definitely never not reading a letter again. I was shocked when you were like, "Oh, I'm done with Dawn." She's like,
that was the moment. That was the surprise.
I was like,
you finally called it. Yeah, called it off. That is.
Yeah, but that was very lovely.
Yeah, and thank you everybody for joining us here for episode 8. For the Love Sweetie podcast on YouTube, like, share, subscribe. If you haven't shared this with your friends, share it with your friends. I mean, this is the soap opera of the 40s on YouTube right now in Iowa that's real. So please share it with your friends. The website's being updated with more of the photographic content and things. That is www.lovesweetiepodcast.com. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or Amazon Music, leave a review. That would really help us out. And we're just going to keep on growing our audience. The audience has been growing for the show. And just thank you to all the listeners who are on this journey with us.
All right. We'll see you next Sunday.
See you next Sunday. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Love Sweetie podcast. For more information on Sweetie and her life, as well as more information on this podcast, please go to www.lovesweetiepodcast.com. Again, that's www.lovesweetiepodcast.com.